Alright, hello hackers, welcome to this first video in the LevelKit series where we're going to be looking at how to develop text-based adventure games using the Python language in this nice little framework built here. So to begin with, I'm going to assume that you've got PyCharm installed and that you also have downloaded LevelKit from either the GitHub repository, which there'll be a link in the description below, or you've also got it from wherever your school is providing that to you on your learning management system. So to begin with, I just want to give you a quick explanation of exactly what LevelKit is and how it works, run through the quick sample game that's in there as well, and then from there, have a look at where we're going to be editing our files to give us a base understanding of what we're doing here. So to begin with, so that we can actually play the sample game, this is the file that we're always going to run. So whether you've created your own game or you're using the sample game as a base, this GameStart file, GameStart.py file is always going to be the one that we run. So if we right click on that for the first time and click Run Game Start, it will open our game. Now it does open into the background, so I'm just going to bring it up from here. And we can now see that we are in our base game. Now there's no images and stuff like that here. It is supposed to be a very basic game so that we can just see how the rooms and levels all interact together and how we can build a little battle loop and stuff like that as well. So to begin with, you can see here you've got your nice little sort of game information up here at the top with your player stats. Over on the right hand side, we've got our inventory, which includes our backpack, and then any items that we have equipped, and then down here at the bottom we basically have our storytelling window. So you can see here that it says you stand at a junction at an old training complex. A dim corridor stretches left toward a practice alcove with a harsh light that flickers to the right. So which way do we want to go? Now I already know where this is going to end up, so I want to show you that we first of all die in our first battle because we have very poor stats, and then we're going to go back and we're going to collect an item that helps us to win. So to begin with, we're going to go right, and you can see that there's a goblin skulker that plants itself in the middle of a yellow lit hallway brandishing a crude spear and is daring you to pass. Now we can obviously go backwards or we can fight the goblin. So in this case I'm going to fight the goblin, and he prepares to strike, so I'm going to hold my ground. Without proper steel, the goblin spear finds its mark, and you can see here that the background has obviously turned red because we've moved into a different room, and someone dragged us to safety with time to regroup. Now we can gather ourselves and try again, and you can see that it takes us back to the start, and this time, rather than trying to fight the goblin again, we're going to go to the practice alcove. And you can see here that there's a single training blade that rests on a rack. Its edge is polished from countless drills. Dust motes drift through the blue light as you are waiting for your decision. So you can see now that it says that we can take the training blade. This time it will equip automatically, or we can just return. Now obviously we don't want to return because we know what's going to happen there. So when we click on this one here, you can see that the training blade is now equipped up in our inventory in our melee slot. So it also gives us the text here that we've equipped it. So we can now return to the entrance, and this time we're going to go backwards and try and fight the goblin again. So here we go. So we're going to go to the right, we're going to face the goblin, we're going to hold our ground this time, and now our blade flashes and the goblin collapses with a startling hiss, and you can see that it crumples over, leaving the passage quiet, and we now have a gentle green light after some magic occurs. Now obviously at this stage we just have the one option where we can go back to the entrance, and then this time it's actually loading up a new room that was added, and showing that we can then start to add some images into the background, where basically we're just standing in the same beginning place, but this time with two separate options, and I'll talk you through those there. So to explain exactly how all of this is running, we have some folders over here on the left hand side as part of our project, and we can go through and make some modifications to those if you want, but to begin with I just wanted to explain exactly what each of these folders do. So in the assets folder, you can see that we then have two subfolders as well. We have a sounds folder that just has a initialization file and then a registry file. And then we have an images file, which again has an initialization file and a registry file, but this time has a whole heap of different images sitting there ready to go as well. Now, if we were to double click on these images, you'll see that they're just a plain color. And these were the background colors that you were able to see in the different rooms, just to prove that we were moving from one room to the next. This castle image here is one that AI generated for me, and we were able to then see basically the start of where we were. So we have this like dimly lit room and the harsh light and whatever else. Now, the most important thing to identify when we're trying to add either sounds or images is that, first of all, the game's engine best works with a PNG file or a GIF natively. Now, it can support some other file types, but if you do notice that your image is not loading, it is likely because it is not within the supported range. To be able to put a new image in so that the game can actually play it, we do need to edit this registry file. So you can see here that it creates a dictionary, which includes 2 strings. Now, the dictionary itself is called images, and we have the key, which is the name or alias that we're going to be giving to the file itself. And then we have the full file extension and name that is there. So you can see that down here, we're going to have one that is called Castle Start. Okay, now that does not exist as a file, but over here it says castle.png. Now this is case sensitive, so you must ensure that whatever your file is named over here in your folder, you must also name it exactly the same here in your registry file. So to be able to add a new image, say for instance I wanted to add an image called black, okay, and I could then add black.png. I must put quotation marks around both the alias and the file name, and then it's very important that we add a comma here to the end. Now, syntactically, we don't actually need the comma there if this is the last item within our list. However, it is just good practice for us to put the comma in at the end so that if we would add another item, we don't have to remember to go back and add that comma there because it will cause an error if it is missing one. Now, obviously the black image does not exist, so I'm going to take that one out. And I was doing some testing earlier with a goblin image, which I'm going to take out as well, just to bring those back to the start and save that file. So that's our assets folder, basically summed up nice and quickly. We place all of our images in our image folder, and then we can alias the image and then the file name as part of our dictionary that sits there in the registry. In the sounds file, things work exactly the same. However, at this point in time, we do not have any sound files in there, hence it being blank. Next up, the next folder down is one called the battle loop. So you can see here that we have an initialization file, but there's nothing in there at the moment. And then there's also a goblin trial. Now, basically this is the fight that takes place between you and the goblin, and it shows where we're going to be directed to if we win the fight or where we're going to be directed to if we lose the fight. It shows us what our victory text is now defeat text and what the actions are that can occur, but we'll have a whole nother video on battle loops so that you can see what they are at a later date. The next file here is your engine file. Now, I would say that almost in all cases, you are never going to need to actually edit these files at all. So we can just sort of skip over that one there. The game file, this one's a little bit game folder, this one's a little bit different. Now, what you can see here is a whole heap of files that include our default values. So if I open the defaults file itself, you can see here that we get some weapon definitions and base item definitions that come from our items. We can find which room or which level we're going to be starting from. So if I open that one up there, you can see that there is one called start room, and we'll get to how we just call it start later. And then if we were to lose and get game over, where we're going to return back to, which is just that same room there. Now that does allow us to set a different room if we need to. We can set our size of our height and width of our screen, and then what the different starting stats are, any of the title options and things like that. We can combat tune if we need to, and then what XP looks like when we are returning to the game. In the encounters section, this allows us to set up random encounters as well. Again, there will be a separate video on this one, so I'm just going to brush over that one to begin with. We have our items and our weapons. Now these two are basically the same thing. However, weapons obviously would either fall into a melee or a ranged section, which is something that we can do there, allowing us to modify the player's attacking stats. Items might be things like keys, or we could potentially add books, which the player can read to increase their statistics. In terms of the theme, this is basically our cascading style sheet if you're familiar with web, where we can change some of the settings for things like what the background color by default is, what the text color by default is, and then specifically setting any of those options if we need to, so that they're ready to go. Finally, we have our XP here. This basically is setting up what the XP requirements are for the different levels, so that we can then continue to grow. And then obviously as your player continues to gain experience, they're then able to move forward in the game, getting stronger and stronger and stronger if you want to develop it in that way. The last folder that we have access to is one that we have kind of had a quick look at in terms of one of the files quite quickly, but basically this is where we build all of our levels. Now each of the files is going to look exactly the same like this, where we have our room, it's calling in a room spec class, and then from there we set our ID. So you would have seen before that when we started the game in our defaults file, we said to the game that it was going to load the start room. Now basically what it's grabbing is it is grabbing the ID from our room and finding what that one is there. We can then give it our title, what the body text is, what the background color is going to be in that particular room, and then also from there what our options are. So this becomes the text that you see on the button, and that becomes the target level that we are going to move to next. So that's it for the quick rundown of how our game actually works and what all of the different folders are, so that you can see each of the different pieces of information there. And then from here, we're going to start to break down how to add a new level, also modifying the background with a different image in the next video. So I look forward to seeing you there.